there was one disciple in particular that I believe had a whole lot in common with you and me. Then again, however, he may not have been anything like any of us. I don't really know. Nobody really does know much about him, to be quite honest. Truth is, there is one fact ever recorded in all of history about this one disciple. His name. His name was Nathanael. Well, we also know that he was from the town of Bethsaida, which is where a handful of other disciples were from, brothers Andrew and Simon Peter. They were from Bethsaida too. Philip, that was his hometown. But this one's name was Nathanael. He was from Bethsaida, and he was an acquaintance of Philip. So, well, really, there's 3 facts that we know about him. But that's it. It's kind of the beauty of his story, really. He's just a guy, as far as we know. Easy to imagine that he is just like any of us. He's a face and a name. Most of the stories in the Bible, you know, they seem to have something important to say about somebody. It turns out that it was really important that these stories connect with real people that other people might know of. That's how it worked. That's what made these stories credible in the early days. They say, do you remember Joseph of Arimathea? Had a little bit of money. Remember him? Well, yeah, sure. Joseph of Arimathea. Are you kidding? A little bit of money? He was loaded. Good man, though. Well, you know that he's the one who bought the tomb for Jesus, paid for it outright, even persuaded old Pilate to give him Jesus' body. That's how it worked. Because you would have heard of a guy named Joseph of Arimathea, or Saul of Tarsus, or John the Baptist. That's how people knew that these stories were not just fables. They were connected to real people that you might know something about. So that you might just follow up with some other people who knew the people that you knew. And stories about Jesus were made real through other faces and names. But then there's Nathanael. Could be that somebody else knew a thing or two about him. It's hard to say. But no one else in the Bible ever mentioned his name. Chances are, some of the first people reading or hearing the gospel stories of Jesus, they probably had heard of him. But since we don't know anything else really, I think he's a great character to imagine could be like any of us. And this is his story. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. Nathanael replied, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered, do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, very truly I tell you, you will see the heaven opened and the angels of God descending and ascending upon the Son of Man. Boy, can anything good come out of Nazareth? That's what he said. Nazareth, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now, Nathanael was not saying anything earth-shattering. Everybody knew that the whole region of the Galilee was a backwards place. Simple people, you know. Kind of folks that it was easy to look down your nose upon. Growing up down in Georgia, we had a good notion of how the rest of y'all looked upon us. And we thought we'd hit the big time when our governor was elected to be the president of the United States of America, Jimmy Carter. And you know what people said about him? Oh, he's just a peanut farmer from a town called Plains. That didn't really bother us much, though. You see, growing up in Georgia, we always had our neighbors to the west to look down our noses on. Alabama. Oh, being from Georgia isn't so bad. Could always be worse, could be from Alabama. In fact, we used to ask people if they knew why Jesus was not from Alabama. Do you know why? We say it's because God could never find 3 wise men in the whole state of Alabama. That's how we made ourselves feel better. Look west, there's always Alabama. Well, now, the good people of Alabama, they tell you the very same joke about Mississippi. There's always somebody who's got it worse than you, I guess. But I don't know who it is the people of Mississippi look down on. That's something like Galilee, Mississippi. You're the butt of everybody else's jokes. And those jokes stick around long enough to become something of a reality. Can anything good really come out of a place like Nazareth? Up there in the Galilee where there's nothing but fishermen, carpenters, olive farmers, the backwoods, the other side of the tracks, the wrong side of the tracks. See, Nathan really might be a little like us. He can't believe anything good can come out of a place like Mississippi or Nazareth. And we don't really believe it all the time either. Dangerous to say, I know, but in the depths of our souls, knowing what we know about who we are and who we have been, we don't really believe it all the time either. I mean, we don't really believe that God loves us as much as the preacher says all the time. And we sure do not act like God knows us all the time. It's like this elder I had in church years ago, dear old man, Charles Wilson. 6 days a week, and the latter half of the day on Sunday, Charles Wilson spoke with all the eloquence and charm of a sailor. I'd visit Charles Wilson sometimes just to learn colorful new terms of the English language. He once tried to give up swearing for Lent. It was a disaster, and it just made him cuss all the more. And it's like he thought that God wasn't really listening except when he was in church on Sunday. He'd say the prayers at the table for communion, and suddenly this entirely other man named Charles Wilson seemed to appear. Every prayer for the bread, for the cup, for the offering, every prayer spoken in what you might imagine is the King's English. We thank thee for thy bountiful graces, and so forth and so on. You've never heard so many these and thous and thines in your whole life. Great prayers. Wonderful prayers. Respectful prayers. All as if God had not heard a single sentence that man ever said anywhere else. And not that he's a special case. We are all like that in some way, aren't we? Not always aware, not always believing. Philip said to Nathanael, "Come and see. This man is the fulfillment of all that we have ever hoped for. Come, see." That's how this all began. One friend said to another, "Just come and see." Now, Nathanael could be like you or me, or dear old Charles Wilson for that matter. We don't know much about him, but Jesus did. Jesus seemed to know a great deal about Nathanael, although they had never met. Jesus knew. He said, "You are a good man, Nathanael. I know you. Here is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Now, Jesus knew him. He saw him sitting there under a fig tree in the distance and somehow knew him, knew the man's very soul. And it was Nathan's friend Philip who had said, "Come and see." And you know, Philip had a great deal of trust, didn't he? Because Philip trusted that Jesus was all that he had hoped for and more. Philip, get this, Philip trusted that Jesus would take care of the rest, which is where we usually get hung up. What we don't do in sharing our faith with others is simply say, "Come and see. See for yourself. I believe in this thing so strongly that I know you will see it too." We don't do that. Maybe we should, but we usually operate out of this assumption that it's all entirely up to us. Do you know what I mean? That we have to have some convincing argument, like we have to have all the answers. I mean, you can even take courses on having all the answers. Here's how to win an argument with people who don't believe. As if it is all up to you. I mean, Jesus said what at the end of Matthew's gospel? "Go, make disciples of all nations." Sounds like it's all up to us. Like a lot is depending on us. You go, make disciples. And yet Philip said to his friend, "Come and see." And there was this deep trust in the Lord that something was going to happen all on its own, despite Philip. As if Jesus might be able to handle the business of making disciples out of the man by himself. Come and see. There's a kid over in New Albany. He's 15 years old. He's recently moved into a brand new house with his mom and his brother and his sister. They have never had a house before. But because their house had been built by volunteers and financed at 0% interest over 30 years, they are able now to have their own house. That is how Habitat for Humanity works. The idea, the hope is that home ownership and a community of care and compassion will utterly change the financial future of an entire family, which could in turn completely change a family's perspective on what actually is possible in life. But over the course of the past year, this kid had seen his house at many different stages of its construction. Maybe after school one day, on the way home from church on another day. He had never been by it on a Wednesday or a Saturday when the volunteers were there. So finally, one Wednesday after school, he did. He came up to the house where he was one day going to live with his mom, and there were these people up there on the roof putting shingles on it. And if you've ever done this, you know that most of the people up there just don't even look like they belong. I mean, half of them don't even know what they're getting into. So he sees this and he says to his mom, "Who are those people up there?" "Well, they're volunteers, sweetie. They're helping build our new house." He said, "Why would they do that?" I mean, the very idea that people would just give away their time and energy was profound. That there is this entirely other way of being in the world. Can you imagine? Because really, we can talk a blue streak about Jesus and this entirely other way of being in the world. We can describe it. We can demand it. We can extol its virtues. It seems to be, however, that it is an impossible thing for anybody else to truly ever believe. That is, unless we actually invite them to come and see.